At the 1 hour mark of continuous use of a video game, Facebooking, any of these digital technologies, what happens is the dopamine backs up in the brain and it starts to overload. And so you have the brain. This is about the area in the brain, deep in the middle, called the locus accumbens. Whenever we're doing anything pleasurable, dopamine rushes into that area and it causes pleasure. It's a normal, wholesome activity. But when we go beyond 1 hour when it comes to digital technology, the brain begins to become overloaded, so it builds a dopamine barrier to try to keep the dopamine out. But we continue to push it, and we will saturate that barrier, and if we go long enough, we'll get enough dopamine over that barrier to get into the locus accumbens to give us the pleasure jolt that we want. But the catch-22 is, the more we do that, the taller that barrier gets. And so we just continue. If you're playing video games, you have to go to the next level. If it's porn, what excited you yesterday doesn't excite you today, so you have to look at something a bit more vile and a bit longer. Same thing that happens to drug addicts. You have to keep going to the stronger thing to get the same amount of pleasure. Now, if you don't stop this, and most don't, and you continue to push it month after month, eventually that wall will become so tall that it becomes nearly impossible to generate enough dopamine to get over the barrier. And when that happens, the brain, that area of the brain, the pleasure center, goes numb, resulting in the condition anhedonia. One of the things that I am asked all over when I speak to young people, they'll raise their hand during a question and answer session. They'll go, hey, how do you get rid of that anhe thing you were talking about? You know why they ask me that question? It's because they have experienced the numbness and the dullness and the zombie-like effect that it leaves them. Now, the reason I started talking about this at length from a Christian perspective is Dr. Archibald Hart, who is a Christian, says that he believes with all of his heart that that is the area of the brain that God created and uses for us to enjoy and take pleasure in Him. And I believe if there ever was a conspiracy from the dark side to numb an entire generation to the voice of God, it would be to say, give them these gadgets, which are good and have a place, but he would say, just overdo it. And I want to see balance restored, as many pastors do, so that the voice of God and the enjoyment of God can return to an entire generation. And that's really, at the end of the day, what I am about. Now, I believe the neuroscience community is finally catching up with God. I'll leave you with this and we'll take a break. Tell me if this doesn't describe anhedonia. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity with a continual lust for more. It's been around for a while, hasn't it? It's just now being induced by the technology.